Coaching in Session,
your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
Welcome, Ronni Landeck, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, today we're going to be talking about your work, resilience coach, and I just love this idea of resilience. It's something that I've been talking on the podcast probably for the past month or two with my guests, with my blogs, is because resilience is so important, especially at this time of the release of the podcast, because people are thinking it's either do or die. And right now, I hope everyone is doing. And sometimes people, they might not have the mindset for doing, or they might not have the capabilities for doing, because they feel as if they're not enough, or that there's just too many insecurities within them. So they take the lesser road. And I know you help people look at what they're capable of and to help them achieve more in life, right? The goals that they're going for, they can reach them. So with all that being said, I would love to learn more about you. And then if you could tell the audience, a little bit about yourself, and then, how you got into this work.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. So I've been coaching full time for a few years, but my career in leadership is really what led me here. Like, I saw the common thread was always seeing where could I help the people around me thrive and maximize what they were facing in life, whether it was a transition or even a current challenge that they were in the middle of. So as a coach, what I love doing is helping mostly women, but I help men as well as clients to really take where they are and either get to next level or lead with more resilience so that they can be adaptable, so they don't veer towards burnout, so that they're actually experiencing joy in the middle of this life. Joy isn't somewhere ahead of you. Joy is now. So those are some of the things I work on. We get practical career things, relationship things. I look at every client as a whole, a holistic approach to how their life is and what they want.
Yeah, most people, when they're looking for coaching, one of the first things they think about is, I feel like there's something missing, or I feel like I'm stuck. What do you see often with your clients, that missing aspect to them?
Yeah, I would say the people I work with, they've tried things, right? They've had this desire or this sense of something that is just not satisfying or just straight up isn't working, right? So they've tried things, but when I work with them, eventually what we get to, and sometimes very quickly get to, is the answer's been there. It's within them, but they haven't fully taken responsibility and haven't fully owned, this was my story, or these were the events that I lived. But I have the agency to create something new. And that's really where we go, because that's where possibility lies, right? Saying, what is the actual vision I have? So get clear about the vision, get courageous about what that will look like and what changes the person is willing to engage in to get there. And it's a beautiful journey. It's not easy, but I would say it's more like uncovering what they already knew was there and having this safe and supportive vehicle to get there in. And that's what I love about coaching.
Yeah, I think of this idea of the question of why. Like, kids, if they're curious about something, they'll ask why. Like, where do babies come from? You say, oh, from wherever, and they go why, and then you go down the list of next, and then you keep saying why, and then eventually it gets to the part where you're like, wait, I don't even know why. So you are looking at this why more deeply than just the common of the surface level things, right? Most people, when they think about why do I have to go to work, so I don't live in the streets, right? Of course, that's a nice why, but then we get down a little bit deeper, right? Because we see people living on the streets, we see people being nomads, or, just living in their van, and they're as happy as can be, right? And you have to ask yourself, like, what's different about them versus me? So it's like, I can live in that situation and still be fine, but I'm choosing to say that I need a home, or I'm choosing to say that I need this lifestyle. And so your why is going to be different. And it's important that you figure out your why. Sometimes that underlying why, it just has to be dug a little bit deeper. You have to dig a little bit deeper. And it's so funny with my kid because, he tells me why maybe like one or two times, and then he stops. And I'm not sure if I'm giving him such a good answer. Like, he doesn't ask any more whys. Like, I'm waiting for the moment where he's like, I got you, Dad. And I'm like, not yet. So it's one of those things where I know many people, they don't dig deep enough. They don't want to dig deep enough. And this is all into the mindset of, why don't people truly want to learn more about themselves? Is it because they're afraid of what they can find, or is it maybe that they're afraid of what they're lacking?
Good question. There is that common denominator of there's a fear. So getting clear about what they are afraid of, I think what shields them from really getting honest and seeing it clearly is the pattern of being either in blame or in victimhood, right? So I'm not denying that bad things happen and that pain happens, right? And that that we have lived experiences that help create who we are. So I'm not denying that, but the danger is that you don't change your story about it and create a meaning that gives you power. So blaming or shifting responsibility away from yourself might support you in the moment, but where does that take you in the long run? It makes you end up stuck, like you said, stuck. So I would think a big piece of what I would want people to realize is, yes, this is part of who you know yourself to be now, but what do you want the meaning to be go forward, right? What can you do if you take responsibility for healing, take responsibility for what you still need to learn skill-wise, education-wise, all the things that we acquire over the course of just doing the work, right? So I think once people really take what's called radical responsibility and start taking action, then the healing is part of that. Then what you might call missteps or failures, but they're all things that you learn from. It's feedback, right? So you hear that. And it takes a lot of, and the reason I say I am a resilience coach is I help people to understand that uncertainty is the only certainty, right? Change is the only constant. We know this, but do we live that way truly? So if you start living that way, then saying that's the reality that we are having in this human experience, how do we thrive in that context? And the way that you thrive in that context is to say, I'm going to become more adaptable. My adaptability is going to make me stronger in the face of adversity. And it's going to make me a bigger gift to those around me and the bigger picture, right? So we start by fixing our bubble, our close circle. But then as you gain traction, whatever traction looks like in your story, then you have an influence that goes farther out, right? Beyond your immediate circle of people who you see. And then you can leave that imprint that makes the world better, that leaves a legacy and all the things that ultimately we desire at a very fundamental level.
This question is, I have to apologize for the question because this is a tough question. Even for me, when I was asking the question to myself, I was like, this is a tough question. Somebody asked me this. I was like, you got to give me like 5 minutes to think about it. And the question is, when was a moment in your life where you felt most powerful?
Powerful. I know I'm kind of scrolling through
There's so
the
many,
years now.
and it's tough.
I have 5 decades here on this planet, Michael. Okay, let me think back. It's interesting because I think what stands out right now is, for me, family is like so crucial to joy and to meaning and to where I belong in this world. So I feel like that's like a really pivotal piece of the pie for me. So when I became a grandmother, what struck me, and this was 12 years ago, what struck me was I have descendants. It's like one thing to be like, hey, I'm a person contributing in my career and in my life, and then becoming a parent, amazing. The day that I was like, wait, I have a legacy that goes generations, plural, beyond me, I felt a huge power and excitement and responsibility all at once when this happened. It was exciting and just really, it changed my view of who I am in this moment in time. So I would say I felt very empowered that my life choices had led to this moment in time, but also I felt so inspired to say I'm never going to give up and I'm never going to stop growing, changing, and contributing because I have a legacy. I have descendants, it was, and I still come back to that as a big chunk of my why. Like, why do I keep putting one foot in front of the other? Why do I pop out of bed excited to be a coach? Why? That's it,
Do you know how a matriarch is born or created?
I would say
it's very much in line with what you just said.
I haven't really dug deep into that concept. I like the question though, Perhaps that's a little bit of the story that I'm forming for myself right now. Yeah.
And I'm loving our conversation because everything is tying so beautifully together, where we're going to get into some of the deeper questions like resilience, of course, and the meaning of life and joy. Because when we start to look at the most powerful moment in your life, for example, right? I'm not trying to dissect you or anything. I'm just saying it was 12 years ago, right? When you had your grandbabies, right? And I just think of, why not another moment in your life, like when you were 20 or 30, when you didn't have these grandkids, right? So sometimes what happens is now where we look at this of, I wasn't truly powerful until I reached this point. And so we were just building up. And I think of how a hero is in a story, right? A hero or heroine in a story, right? They start and they typically are training on the first couple of minutes or hours of a movie or in a book, pages or chapters in a book, and they're building themselves up. Sometimes they can be all powerful and almighty in the beginning, yes, but most of the time it's the hero's journey that is building them up into the person or the hero that they're going to be becoming later on. And so maybe in the beginning, they have turmoil, they have hardships, they have challenges. And those typically help build us, because I couldn't even say with you, like, hey, I felt powerful when I finished college, or I felt powerful when I graduated high school, right? Like I couldn't even give you those answers. And this is what I told you, I would have a really hard time probably giving you a solid answer. And my answer will probably be very much in line to yours. And it'll probably be the moment when I held my first child, where it's just like, did I not feel powerful before then? Oh, I felt powerful many times in my life, but it was those moments in life that really make you pay attention. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to have kids and that you need to have a legacy. I'm not saying that you have to have descendants, but what I'm saying is that there's something in your life that's going to change you. And so now we're getting into this idea of, how can we be resilient into that moment? How can we fight into that moment? And so we think of the hero again, how they have to go through the hardships, the battles, the trials, the tribulations, the scars, the hardships, the hates, the failures, like all of these negative things that would stop the common person. But it's not going to stop a person who's saying, I know what I want, I know I'm going to get, and I'm going to keep on fighting until I get it. Where does resilience lie in the minds of the people today? Do you think people have what it takes to get there? Or do you think that people need a push or a reminder that they can do it?
It's depends on who you're talking about, right? Or who you're talking to. Like what may perhaps generationally, there might be some big differences, because the world that a 20-year-old knows right now compared to what someone who's 50 or 80 knows, like what a different experience the world has been, just based on basics. Like when I was in college, you didn't even have to own a computer, It was just a really different world in that regard. So I would say, in order to be living, breathing, and functioning, we have some level of resilience wired into us, in terms of DNA and our, that first breath we take when we're born. It's pretty much a scream, a cry, right? So I do believe that there's this element of a fighter in everyone who's able to sit here right now and hear this. What I would say varies wildly is, how do we view the things that we don't like, that we have to go through over our lifetime, So perhaps your spiritual upbringing influences how you look at that, or your role models, your parents and your people that form your attitudes early in life. Like I think those stories and those pieces of us kind of program us a bit and lay some building blocks that serve us, or sometimes don't serve us until later we have to say, okay, I need to rethink the way I've been handling my health or handling my relationships or my own, scars from the past. So I would say we have those wake up moments, and perhaps it is when you become a parent. You're like, whoops, okay, time to get serious about XYZ. Or for me, it was, I was so good at surviving, adapting, figuring things out. I would say good at it, but I also realized at some point that survival mode still wasn't my full potential, right? Survival mode was literally just that. And that if I'm really going to help people in a way that feels fulfilling, I had to get beyond survival mode. And that's where I think, the idea of thriving and flourishing and doesn't mean things are always easy, but it means that you bring something beautiful out of something that maybe was ashes, you know,
Mhm.
or was a hot mess. So I forget if I even answered your original question, but that's
Trust
where I
me.
went with that.
Trust me. There, even though I ask questions, it's just to help the guest. This is not a interview where you have to answer my questions. If I ask what color is your ceiling, and you say I'm not gonna, you start telling me about your dog or your cat. Hey, that's where we're going, right? This is a journey. You and I are on a
Gotcha.
journey today. And I think of this interview. I'm not sure if you saw the interview of with Drew Barrymore and Keanu Reeves, where Drew asked him, are you a lover or are you a fighter? And he just, he's an actor. He goes, how can you not be a fighter if you can't fight for what you love? So he said something along those lines. And so either way, it's just this idea of how sometimes people, they can love something, right? They can love something so immensely. And they have to know that sometimes they have to fight for that love to be a reality. And it's not that they have to fight for people to love them, right? It's a different concept. Is more of this idea of, if you have a passion or you have a goal, fight for it. I think of so many stories, and we can go down hundreds of stories, but I just think of so many stories. And the story that comes to my mind is with Steve Harvey. All right. And I can use anyone, right? I'm using him. Steve Harvey, he wanted to be a comedian, right? When he was younger. And so when he got asked in school what he wanted to be, he said he wanted to be a comedian. And he wrote it on a piece of paper, right? He's like, I want to be a comedian. I want to be on TV. And so he goes home. He's so proud of what he wrote, right? He showed teachers, everyone's friends. And he goes home and his mom sees what he wrote. And mom says, no, you're not going to be on no TV. You're not going to be a comedian. You need to get a real job. Right? And then mom goes on and says, tells the dad or, his dad saying, you need to go tell your boy that, he can't do this. Okay. So dad, takes a paper, kind of folds it up and says, okay, let's go upstairs into the room. Then he goes, takes him upstairs to the room and he gives the paper to Steve, his son. And he says, son, keep this paper, put it in your drawer. All right. If this is your dream, then go for it. Okay. Just don't tell your mother. Right. It's like one of those things. And so he had a person in his life that said, hey, you can't do this. And he had a person who said that you could do this. Right. So it's kind of like the yin and the yang, where sometimes some people are not that lucky. Some people, they have the yin and the yang, right? There's this, they just have two naysayers in their life. And it can happen so frequently with parents or teachers or siblings and or friends, even peers. And you would think that if you're going for something like a goal that you have a vision for, that the people around you would help bolster you up. But then you got to think about it, right? And I'm sure you know this firsthand. Like when you start coaching, like who should be your first clients? It should be your friends. It should be your family, right? Typically, if you go to any seminar for coaching, they basically say, ask your family, ask your friends, right? Start there, right? That's the most common sense thing because you're going to get clients very easily, especially if people, they believe in you, right? They want to help you succeed versus, okay, go out into the world and try to do it yourself. And so when you don't have that support system, it becomes immensely challenging for you to even make a foothold in what you want to do. So then sometimes people, they settle for what is capable of or what they can do very easily. If they want to go to a school, they get a nursing degree or something. Okay, I'll just be a nurse. My mom was a nurse or something, right? They didn't really do too much thinking about it. It was just like, this was the path that I think I was supposed to be on rather than finding the path that was for them. Or they didn't find a path that was more challenging where they had to be more resilient. And I'm not saying that nursing school is easy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying being a doctor or being an engineer is easy, right? I'm not saying that any of those paths are just so easy that it is given to you. I'm just saying that sometimes people, they choose a path that is more attainable, right? Is more logical. For example, I'll give you an example, then I'm gonna pass it to you. My mom, right? She's Puerto Rican, and she wanted me to get a good job, right? She didn't want me just to, get like, something that wouldn't make me any money. So I said, okay, well, I guess I have to go into business, and business was making a lot of money at the time. So I could do accounting, finance. I could be making, anywhere from 60 to 80 starting, right? And I was going to be like in my 20s, right? So you can imagine compound in my 30s now. So she wanted me to start a career like that. And I was like, well, I'm doing it. And I was just miserable. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want my life to be miserable. So I said, let me switch it up a little bit, right? I says, what do I want? And I said, teaching. I really love teaching. So I went off to become a teacher. And then my mom, she was like, you want to be what? Very similar to Steve and his mom. And I was like, but my dad wasn't there to say, do whatever you want. I was just like, I'm going to do it, right? And I did it. And sure enough, that choice. It had opened up so many doors for me, where if I just did the business financing stuff, I might be an alcoholic like my father was. And I mean, like we can go down the list of all the negative things that probably would have happened if I just did that route. I said, let me go down this route where I think it's going to be a lot more challenging. I'm going to have to have a lot more resilience along the way, where I understand where people might look at the money in the beginning. They might look at the notoriety in the beginning, because teachers, especially teachers, like, you want to be a teacher? You're a teacher? You're on the street, someone asks what you do. Well, you're a teacher. Oh, you're a teacher. I sell stocks and stuff. So for them, they're superior. So then again, this looks like you have this comparison that people are trying to have with you. But then again, the goals in your life are your goals in life. So when you're helping individuals like truly get down to the nitty gritty of what their goals are, how do you help them find it? How do you help them believe in their goals, even if all of their life they didn't have the support system to help them along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of it is pausing to give them a chance to say and reflect, am I living my own dream, or am I living a dream that someone else has handed to me, right? So perhaps our parents, with great intent, with goodwill, have said, I think you should be X, Y, or Z, because they want us to be safe, or they want us to be, somehow that's the instinct. When, like you said, you did the things that seem to be expected or accepted at least, and then you were like, wow, this is making me miserable. How many people I coach are, mid-career, they have a decent paycheck, they have something that feels pretty stable, they're counting on this income for their lifestyle. I get it. It's the system we're in. But at the bottom of it all, they're not fulfilled, right? Maybe they don't feel like they enjoy who they have to work with, or they don't enjoy how many hours this job and company is requiring of them. So now they feel like they don't have time for the things that they actually love doing. Like maybe it's, travel, maybe it's health, maybe it's, playing sports with their kids, like the things that seem to get squeezed out so easily out of the schedule. So I think what I find super important is starting with what is my client's like top handful of values, like what are their true core personal values, obviously different for each person, and even shifting through your life stages, right? Like what you held as your strongest values at age 20, some different ones may pop to the top, by the time you're, 50 or 60. But nonetheless, getting clear, people haven't even thought about what their values are and maybe delineated them and written them down and seen, wait, because my work doesn't align with my core values, that's sort of why I'm suffering. Or standing up to this new structure at work, or this new boss that I answer to. Oh, now I see why it's really keeping me up at night, So getting them to pause and really see where they're out of sync with what their heart beats for and what their life is looking like, finding those moments and those discrepancies, and then saying, all right, based on this awareness, what am I going to choose for myself? And how, what am I willing? What's the cost of choosing something new? And what's the upside? What's the win of making these changes? And you and I both know that making a change that makes you take ownership of where you're going, regardless of the outcome, it's powerful, right? You win because you learn to trust yourself. We realize if I change jobs or change, my key relationships or things like that, or move to this town I've always had the desire to live in, whatever these things are that feel like a risk at the moment. At the end of it, the outcome is going to be what it's going to be, but who I am being in the process is the important piece. So I bring clients to that point of, who are you being when you're doing these things? Who do you understand yourself to be because of these choices? And that's where I think powerful shifts can happen. People say, oh, they'd like to have more confidence, or where does confidence come from? It comes from knowing yourself, trusting yourself, and taking action regardless of fear. So living fearlessly, and then owning the outcomes, saying, you know what? I don't know step C, but I know who I am as I take step A and take step B. And I know what I love about myself and what I love about the life I'm creating and the reality that I'm experiencing. That's where joy enters.
I think of just how we develop, right? Because there's going to be different mindsets and there's going to be different seasons of our life, as you were saying, where I'm not going to think the same way in my 20s as I would in my 40s, for example. And it's not to say that my thinking in my 20s was incorrect. It's just where I was or where I needed to be. Because I just think of like a home, right? Imagine if a home needs a foundation, it needs walls and it needs a roof. And I say, okay, well, just put the roof on. Okay. Well, we don't got a foundation, we don't got no walls, so the roof ain't going to stick, right? So the roof is just going to be there on the ground and it's going to rot away. We have to follow a system in a sense, right? So we have to go through our days where I know people, they look for shortcuts, they look for the quick fix or the magic pill. And yeah, sure, there's some hacks for certain things, but the reality is it's a journey, right? Like we're going to progress some way or somehow. And as you said, like you got good at surviving and adapting. And many people, this is where they are right now. They just survive. They don't thrive. They just, adapt to the situation rather than take full control. And all of these things are something that when they become just a regular thing for us, it's just like, yeah, I'm just doing it like a 9 to 5 or, weekend we go out and it's just all systematic. And sure, systems are good for a business, but for a life, it could be maybe the inhibitor for either joy or fulfillment. And one of my questions I want to ask, because I think this is so important, where people are going after their goals, and this idea of if I can reach my goals, then I'll be happy, or if I reach my goals, then I'll be fulfilled, if I reach my goals, then I'll find joy. And I think of, is there a separation between fulfillment and joy? And if there is a separation, what is it?
Yeah. Let's think here. Fulfillment, as I understand it, is this idea that the life you're experiencing creates fullness, expansiveness, feeling fully alive versus numbed out in certain ways or just going through on autopilot, right? So I would say fulfillment, as I understand it, is you are all the way showing up for yourself and for those that you truly want to influence and those who you love. Fulfillment, I know it's such a big term, but I think we sense when something feels expansive and that it's moving us where we were meant to develop and grow. So I would say fulfillment is something along those lines, whereas joy is something that I do believe it's a state, and a state that exists in each of us naturally, but it also can get covered up so easily, right? Joy can get covered up and blocked by, we mentioned it before, other people's expectations that we're trying to live up to, perhaps a system that we joined in on, maybe a job or a career path that we thought was a good idea. Then we're a little bit down the road and we're like, whoa, this is making me feel stuck, or maybe I liked it and now there's something about it that I don't like. Now what do I do, right? So I would say removing those blockages, sometimes they're external, most of the time I would say they're internal blocks, maybe assumptions we've made, reframes of things that we could make to really say, wait, joy has been here all along. Joy is available to me at every moment, in every location. And part of, I would say, maturing as a developed human, someone with character and with wisdom, is to say, I know how to experience joy. And it's like my default. Not saying everything's going to be perfect, not saying that I'm always even happy. This week, literally, not even 5 days ago, my brother passed away. And did I take things off my schedule? I really didn't. And for me, that was a conscious decision. I have 2 brothers. My eldest is the one that passed away. And I kept my schedule how it was intentionally because there's this part of me that wants to experience life and not hit pause when hard things happen. So yes, there's sadness, there's grief, and at the very same time, there's joy. There's gratitude for his life and what he taught me and what he taught so many other people. So I bring that up just because it's timely and relevant, because I'm here able to talk to you and hopefully bring information that is going to open somebody's eyes a bit, or maybe open their heart a little bit somewhere where it was closed off, to say, there is work I'm willing to do on myself, because there's something beyond, something lies beyond that. And for me, what lies beyond the hard things is experiencing full joy, feeling like you're in flow when you set your mind to something, and loving the life that you have, being grateful, and being willing to keep putting yourself out there and keep challenging what you thought you knew. I think those are all the things that lead to joy.
Well, first off, I'm with you with this whole idea of loss and grief. I know how difficult that can be. So I'm here, for you. I want you to know that. And I think of, the same question that I asked you with fulfillment and joy. I started to think about how would I answer that question, because it's not always about just, is there a right or wrong answer? I don't believe there's a right or wrong answer in coaching a session. I believe there is your answer. And I think of when fulfillment for me is, I think of a situation or a scenario where my wife and I, we have photos of our children, right? And we have 3 picture frames just right now. We only have 3. They're still young. And we have one of my son, we have one of my daughter, and then we have one of the family, right? So that's how we do our picture frames. Like it's a collage, just like 30 pictures in each of them, right? And when I think of fulfillment, I think of me hanging up the picture frame and my wife telling me it was crooked. And I go, okay, and I got to fix it. And so it's okay, great. And then I look at the joy aspect, and it was when me and my wife are picking the pictures to put in the picture frame. So I just simplified it a little bit for me, in this idea of fulfillment, or joy came before the fulfillment, where I felt it before I said, look at that, right? And fulfillment could be, look at that, like your legacy, your life. And oftentimes people, they want their life to be some level of meaning, some level of fulfillment. And I think of when I had a loss in my life, it was a big loss in my life, where that same night I got a call from the teacher I was working with. I was working in special ed. And she said, I forget what she said. She said she can't make it into work for some reason. She had a headache, or she wasn't feeling good, or something came up, right? But she couldn't make it, right? And if it wasn't me, it was going to be terror in the school, right? Special ed, like, they don't like change. So either way. So I was like, I was going to call, I was thinking about, like, I was going to tell her, I was going to call you and call out. And then so I was like, I guess this is a moment for me to pay attention, right? Like maybe this was life, like pushing me, saying, you're not calling out tomorrow. Like, you're not going to take a day off. Very similar to how you didn't take a day off. So I went into work the next day, and, sad, depressed, basically just making my way through, no major issues. And typically we do, but there was no major issues that day. And I remember I was just kind of standing there, like, watching the kids. They have like 5-minute free time in between working. So they work 25 minutes, they get 5 minutes off. That's how we break up the day for them. And one of the kids stopped on the way to the 5-minute break. And he looked at me, he goes, Mr. Rearden, are you okay? And I was like, what? In my mind, I fooled all the teachers, I fooled all the staff, I fooled all the parents, but I couldn't fool a first grader. I said, dang. I said, wow, that's powerful. And that was the moment I left teaching. Like that was the moment I changed everything, right? Because I saw a lot of things that year. I saw teachers retiring. I saw a lot of people, like, they were happy that the teachers were there and we saw their life. We could look at all the slides. And I said, is this the fulfillment that I want? And I basically said, no, this is not. And it's not that I'm belittling someone else's life. It's just that I wanted something more. I wanted something greater. And there's no shame in saying you want something more. There's no shame in saying you want something different. And I think that, we live in this very serial world, or very simplistic world, where everyone needs to have a certain thing. Everyone needs to have a Gucci bag, or a Lamborghini, or a Prada bag. Like you have to have that in order to fit in. But the reality is, you just need to have what you want, or what you need. And to do the work that is necessary for you to get there, you have to learn about yourself more than what most people feel comfortable with. Because if you have to dive into deep, dark moments of yourself in life, I mean, most people will throw you into the closet with their skeletons to sweep it under the rug with all the other problems before they even claim this idea of wanting to change. And so, yes, people can change. People have this idea for change. People, might even get there. But the reality is, most people are not going to change unless they have a severe or tragic trauma in their life. Most people are not going to change if something big doesn't knock them in the back of the head and saying, hey, like, pay attention. So if we know that people wait for trauma or hardship to really step into resilience or to really step into their goals or to really step into life in general, like, is there a way for people to say, you know what, maybe that hasn't happened in my life today, but maybe I can give myself this idea that I should start today? What would that idea be for people?
Yeah. The idea, a thought to try on that I would throw out there is the concept that instead of wishing that life is easier, wish that I am stronger. So instead of saying, I wish my life were easier, instead shift it to say, I wish I could be stronger. I wish I could face this with more courage and with more tenacity. So stop looking outside of yourself and look at what can I do? Who can I grow to be? So that's, I think, a concept that would lead to more empowered, people being willing to look more honestly at themselves. Because ultimately, I don't know that it's about people changing and saying, hey, I want to change. Instead, it's more like, hey, I want to be compassionate towards this deepest part of myself, this part of me that judges myself, that negative self-talk part of myself, right? There's so many ways to explain it and name it, but we all have that little judge thing that rises up, right? It's part of our, our our psychology, protected us at certain points and still does, but it takes over and doesn't serve. So I would say countering that inner voice that judges, where we judge ourselves, instead countering that with self-compassion and saying, hey, you did the best you could with what you knew and with the resources you had at that time, pulling back on that resistance and taking that weight off allows some space to form to say, okay, now I forgive myself for that thing. Now what? Now what's possible? So that's when then other parts can emerge that are more compassionate towards others or more creative in our work that we do. That book you've been waiting to really sit down and maybe outline, or that part of your business that you've been like, hey, I'm ready to grow it there, or that whatever that thing is that maybe you knew you wanted, but weren't sure when was going to feel like a good enough time to do it. So I think making that shift towards self-compassion is the making of fertile ground to do the things that we really were put here to do. Because we already know somewhere deep in the back of our mind, and maybe when we were a kid, the things were like, hey, I'm going to do this, or I love doing that. And then it gets kind of buried or put on a shelf. And through the journey that you referenced, through the journey, those things don't go away. They come back, and sometimes we can shine the light on them just for a minute and say, wait, I almost forgot that I wanted to do that with my life and wanted to show up that way. So I think the process involves, removing that weight, that burden that we allow ourselves to place on ourselves, like noticing it's there, removing it, and then letting the other parts shine forth that are very strong and tenacious and creative and connected to others or connected to a cause that we've always cared about. So that's how I see it going.
Perfect. And one of the reasons I love coaching in session is not because it's my podcast or anything, but it's because I bring on so many wonderful coaches just like yourself, and I can get a feel for just how you can resonate with somebody, where someone can say, you know what, Ronnie's just a coach for me. Like you're the person for me. Like after speaking with you or just hearing you, like it's exactly what I'm looking for. And I just think of this idea of how people need different things. For example, boys and girls. You raise a boy a little bit differently than you would a girl. It's not that, they're not equal in the sense of your kids, but it's just that a boy you might have to be a little bit more tough with, right? And girl maybe is a little princess, right? Got a boy and a girl, right? The girl is super diva, super princess, okay? It's okay, I don't mind. The boy is super tough. He's a warrior. That's his life, all right? And I just think of like the sugar and spice aspect. And I've talked about this on the podcast several times, so many episodes, where there's a coach that's going to be for you, right? It could be a coach that is going to be more forward. It's saying, hey, like, boom, let's go. Think of David Goggins, right? He's very spicy. He's not the coach for everybody, right? But then again, you have someone who's super compassionate, super aware. It's like, hey, I see you, right? I feel it, right? Let's work where we are. All right. Versus David Goggins. Oh, 10 miles. It's like, I got my legs. It's like, well, come on, baby. So it's like, so it's a different mindset. I could bring on other coaches just like you, Ronni, and this idea of you being able to help people in just a different and simplistic way is so important, because it doesn't have to be rocket science for you to get better, right? We find the smallest step we can take today and we take it, right? It doesn't have to be something grandiose automatically where it's like, okay, we got to go change the world. Well, let's start with figuring out our daily schedule maybe, right? Like, let's start there, and then we could win the battles for the year and then the world, right? All this is to be said is that, our journey is still on the way, right? If you're listening to this, your journey is not done yet, right? We can still reach all the things that we want to, our goals, our levels of resilience, the idea of where we can fully be joyful, or maybe even the aspect of we feel fulfilled, and that we can look back and say, wow, like we had a wonderful life. And maybe we're not there yet, but it doesn't mean that we're not done yet. So as we begin to wrap up, Ronni, I would love to get some fun words from you. And then, of course, please tell everyone how they can find you, reach out, and begin working with you.
Yeah. So final words, I would say trust that the process is unfolding exactly in the timing and in the way that is best for you, whatever that looks like. Pain is not an indicator necessarily that you are choosing wrong. It means there's a lesson to be learned. So learn that lesson. Don't get stuck in that pain. So I look at it that way. The other piece that I love clients to understand is when you make a shift in one segment of your life, let's say it's, maybe how you're showing up in your role at work. When you make a shift that's meaningful, that gives you some traction, and you're like, wow, now I'm really feeling like I'm showing the best parts of me and able to use my gifts. When you make one change, it changes all the other parts of your life, right? It changes how you end up showing up for your children, how you end up for your partner, for your own health. So start and acknowledge that momentum is what matters. That's what gets everything moving in the direction that you deserve it to go. But you have to do the work and commit to it. Where to find me? Easiest is my website. It's ronnilandeck.com. I have ways to contact me, and I have some free things I love people to jump into if it clicks for you. And I love sharing the idea of boundaries and how that is game changing for all the areas of your life. And also the idea people want work-life balance. It'd be hard to find anybody in their career that says, especially, people juggling family and their career, who say that they wouldn't want it, right? People want work-life balance. Well, what it comes down to in my mind is it's really about harmonizing who you are, what your priorities are, what your values are, and then how do you navigate that in your career? How do you advocate for yourself, use your voice, manage upward, make choices that are strategic to develop into the career and the career portfolio that you want, not limiting yourself. So those are things that I love to share. And if you go to my website, you get there's a free little guide, ebook, and a masterclass and ways to connect with me. I have one-on-one, I have groups, and I have a community that's free to join, because I think it's about connecting and supporting each other, the wisdom that we all can bring to one another. So I also have a way to join a free community on my website too.
All right, perfect. And it's going to be easy. All the links are right down below, so you can do everything that Ronni just said at just a click of a button. You don't have to go too far, and I encourage you to begin today, because when you're on that road for change, it's often the first step that can be most challenging. It could be fear. Am I going to feel accepted? Am I going to be able to do it? And all of these thoughts are just kind of running through your mind to keep you comfortable, to keep you safe. But sometimes putting yourself out there is the safest thing you can do. So don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Don't be afraid to challenge where you are today, because if you are vying to be someone different in life, the only thing you have to do is dream big and to keep aiming for it, all right? And to equip yourself with someone who's going to help you, just like Ronni, get to where you're not only having your goals, but where you're also keeping your dreams. So I do want to thank you, Ronni, for coming on, of course, spending some time and talking about your work and your story today.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure. Can't wait to see where it leads for you too. Thanks so much.